When I talk about household management, I understand that some of the things that I'm introducing to you are overwhelming and can be difficult to do consistently. I'm going to share a little bit about my own experiences. I'm going to share with you why I keep covering household management related topics and ultimately some of the power you can have on your small farm or homestead when you implement even a fraction of what I'm describing. I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead. Now, when you have a small farm or a homestead, you're essentially creating more chores for yourself. I don't know, are you a glutton for punishment or something like that? But essentially, when you have livestock, for every category of livestock you have, there are certain care routines, there are certain activities that must be done. So if you have goats and sheep and camels and chickens and dogs and every one of those things have to be fed. You're increasing the number of chores. When I talk about household management, I'm also talking about your pantry management. Do you have enough food on hand if there's a seasonal storm? Do you have enough food on hand if you go off grid or the power goes out? What about household regular maintenance? I'm not going into these details to create anxiety, and I will often tell you right up front that if you came to my house today, you would see more examples of what not to do than examples of what to do. I'm probably supposed to be mowing the grass or something right now, and I'm here doing a podcast. There is a large amount of procrastination that happens only because you know what needs to be done. It's not so much procrastination as just knocking stuff off of your list. I've introduced you to books that are about household management from the perspective of extremely wealthy individuals. I wouldn't call them extremely wealthy, but somebody who owns an estate house that's maybe 12 bedrooms and it's a bed and breakfast or hotel sized facility, and they're managing it like a business. And then I advocate to you that you should run your small farm or homestead like a business. Now, from my perspective, I've written a program on, I think it's like 37 different ways to make money from your land and to basically have a full-time income without ever leaving your home. But then I also advocate the value of having community relationships, such as hosting parties at your house or doing farm tours. And some people are into ecotourism and they have hip camp on their property. The more of these things that you're doing, the more stable and sustainable your particular homestead will be, the more prosperous it can be. However, it can become a nightmare very quickly. If you spend even 20 minutes with some of the YouTubers that have ran homesteads for years and they always look so successful in the videos, and then suddenly they're quitting the homestead, buying a tiny house or an RV and hitting the road. They've changed what they've done. They couldn't keep doing it forever because they became overwhelmed. Or, for example, there's some well-named people who go out and do presentations, and then if you visited their farm, you might find what seems to be an excessive number of dead animals, broken down equipment, buildings that are not well maintained, and it's just kind of shadows the delusion. So what I just figure is I'll tell you up front is that farms are businesses. If you're going to run a homestead or you're going to run a farm, you need to have checklists, for example. So I went into this one barn and they had a binder in there, and they don't reference it all the time, but the binder basically had a checklist and schedule for every category of animals. So this particular family had horses, and the equestrian community does a wonderful job at this, but they knew what days of the week stalls were mucked out, and so they had horses, goats, and chickens. So what days of the week were the stalls mucked out? So that tells them where the horses should be and should not be. Now, this also means that in their planning stages, they had enough stalls. So the wife didn't come home with extra horses because they had 2 stalls per every horse. And then they had 1 stall if they had a sick horse, which was often full of bales of straw. So it had to be clean. And that's where they put like sweet feed and alfalfa, the sweets and stuff for the horses. But that was a spare stall in case a horse needed to be isolated. They could have the quarantine stall and then an empty stall next to it, and then that's where the next horse is. They aren't that close enough to each other to cause problems. Sometimes horses don't like each other, so they have to put them in every other stall. But again, they knew when the horses had to be out on pasture Or maybe they're out on riding lessons or something, and the stalls were cleaned at that time. Now, if they're cleaning the stalls themselves, they can't be out with the horses the same time they're cleaning the stalls. So this again informs their schedule. But there is one list that was the procedure for caring for the animals. What feed do they get? What was the schedule for shots? When was the last time they got shots? And then there was another schedule for the cleaning and maintenance. So the actual facility that they're in. Now, just because you have 2 stalls for every horses doesn't mean the secondary stall can't be used for another purpose. And so in this particular case, they had another sheet that had the goats, and it had when do the goats get milked? Where's the equipment for milking the goats? All these checklists. It's not as complex as it sounds, but the empty stall would have a goat in it, and then they'd have a note about what goes in the stall. So for the goats, they weren't getting the fancy alfalfa all the time because that's not good for a goat's digestion. But their kid could come in and they knew 1 leaf of the alfalfa, 1 leaf, 2 leaves of the regular hay, a little bit of sweet feed mixed in a bucket. Now it was the same big old tote for everybody, mixed it up. That was the feed ratio for their milking goats. The milking goats were in stall 3 this time of the year, or this time of the rotation. That hay goes up on the wall, that they're in there for a week, and then all of that comes out, it gets mucked out, and then the horses come in. Now what's interesting when you have a variety of animals, they don't have to muck the stall after the goats to bring in the horses. Because if they bring in additional bedding before they bring in the horses, see, somebody thought about all this stuff, then they're able to go ahead and have the stall being shared for 2 purposes. So in permaculture, this is called stacking. Now, where does all this muck go? Well, in a lot of cases, people just throw it out in the yard and pile it up. This particular site had another sheet in this binder, and all these sheets are inside of little plastic things. They're just quick references. It's not a manual, but I want to give you an example of household management. So if you're managing your homestead, this is the house for the animals. How do we maintain it? How do we maintain the value of the building? How do we maintain the health and safety of the animals? So all this stuff gets mucked out. It goes into a composting area, and then the composting area has a completely different routine. And we talk about that in Composting Made Easy, but essentially, they didn't just make giant piles of manure to gas off all of the nutrients. They compost it, and then from the composting area, it goes to the gardens. Now, inside the house, it's the same thing. They sat down periodically. They have a list of the chores for the kids. They have a schedule for vacuuming. If they're hiring a service to vacuum and clean, that's fine. If they're doing it themselves, it's the same schedule. They know what goes in the pantry. They know when they get back from shopping, kind of what they had a shopping list when they went out. It's a well-managed facility. Okay, but here, the people that have great barns, the horse person I was talking about, their house was a mess. It was chaos in the house. They had a system. They weren't consistently applying it. So that's really why I advocate this, having systems in place so that you can support your lifestyle. Now, recently I've been talking about intentional thrift, because what I found out is that as the child age, as life situations change, as I have different interests, some of my systems in the past are no longer appropriate. So we've been able to go through here and take boxes of clothing, boxes of little knick-knack things, and just take them to Goodwill. Put them on eBay to get them out of the house. So you even have this cycle for maintenance where you review your household plan, and some of the things just don't get implemented properly. So if your situation changes, you've got to be able to change the plan, but you've also got to be able to implement, keep, and maintain best practices. This is about time saving. This is about having a plan for what you do. Now, my plans tend to be business processes, but your plan might be cutesy little things so that your kids will be more involved with their chores. And it might be a STAR program where they implement different chores and they take responsibility, and they're responsible for feeding the animals, and these checklists are just there to help them know what the feed ratio is. If you have indoor pets or outdoor pets, or you have different food that you need good, safe food storage so that you don't end up with mice. Inside your house, maybe you have a rotation of winter clothes versus summer clothes. In my particular case, we have work clothes that are just in a tote. There's nothing fancy, it's just in a tote, but they are located in the mudroom where I can then change into those clothes, go do some work, come back in, change out of those clothes, throw that in a laundry basket. We don't wash our work clothes in the regular washer machine. We take them to a laundromat and we use the big industrial washer for that. But do you see where I'm coming from here? These are about what are the things that you're already doing. Can we put them on a chart? Can we put them in a binder? Can we put them someplace that can be easily referenced to make sure that we're doing what's important? And then when we're not doing those things, can we set it aside, go off and enjoy the homestead, go off and enjoy the harvest without having to worry about something getting missed? Things like roof repairs and vehicle maintenance and stuff that happens every couple of months. If it's scheduled into your plan, you can go out. It'd be off farm for 1 day a week. I get a lot of folks that will email me and say they want to stay on the farm more. How do we stay on the farm more? Well, it's income, it's schedule, it's management, and it's plan your vacations in or staycations. Do you see where I'm coming from here? So again, it sounds like I'm harping on some kind of complex system. I've showed you examples. There are actual books you can buy. There are programs that we recommend. In my case, I'm managing a campground, a market garden, the household stuff, the lawns, rental property, vehicle, equipment. It all takes time. It all takes effort. It all takes having a plan. So again, I want to encourage you to write this stuff up, to develop your plan in such a way that you are able to implement it smoothly and easily and not miss any things, because it's the missed things that pile up and become problems. Grass is easy to mow if you mow it on a regular schedule. It's even easier to mow if you replace your grass with gardens. Do you see how this works? That's what I want for you here. That's how you build a prosperous homestead. That's how you have a more enjoyable farm. That's how you stay in this longer and it's more enjoyable for you. That's how you get results. I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead. I'll invite you to ask your questions at www.prosperityhomestead.org. Just go to the contact page and ask your questions about household organization. I want to hear that you're enjoying your household. I want to hear that you're growing your homestead and that you're able to make this a legacy, to make this something that is an experience for your children, that is an experience for your family. It's building community. Again, thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next podcast.